Thoroughness. What does thoroughness and a leadership circle have to do with helping you be and build better bosses in business? That's what we're going to dive into today on Boss Beat. Boss Beat, a latte of leadership for those seeking to be and build better bosses in business. Yes, I am Ben, and yes, I do like my bees. Okay, let's dive right into what I'm talking about when I talk about a leadership circle. This is a diagram, not like a group of people, but a diagram that is a useful tool to help you and those you are trying to build better boss behaviors in become better bosses. How does it work? Well, first of all, we're going to switch over to diagramming today. When we look at how most organizations view leadership, most organizations take a typical top-down perspective, right? They go like so. They go, oot, doot, doot, and they put your leader at the top, and followed by, VPs and directors, managers, and then individual contributors, right? Okay. And if you don't believe that's how most organizations look at it, just take a look at your typical org chart, right? You got the CEO up here, followed by, VPs and SVPs, followed by directors, and so forth, right? The org chart is the classic example. Most organizations say the higher you go in the leadership, the higher you go in the org structure, or the higher you go in the pyramid or triangle, right? Now, that's the way most organizations view it. On the other hand, servant leadership says, well, that's one way to look at it, right? And of course, again, we advocate servant leadership principles here. You can find out more about that on the website at modernservantleader.com. But all great leaders, leadership experts, basically advocate servant leadership. They just use different terms, right? So if that is how most organizations look at it traditionally, servant leadership says, that's backwards, right? The right way to do it is you flip that pyramid upside down and you put the leader at the bottom. And then above them is, VPs and SVPs and directors, managers, and you put individual contributors at the top. What's the difference between those two? Well, one student once said, if you look at what this tells you in the traditional hierarchy, right, it says, hey, look, the higher you climb the ladder, the more people exist to serve you, right? The more people beneath you to support what you're trying to do as a leader. That's what this model, the traditional view, tells us. As they joked, that also tells you that the crap flows downhill. The lower you are on the totem pole, the lower you are on the triangle there, the more crap you have to deal with. On the flip side, what does the servant leadership model tell us? This visual tells us that the higher you climb in the traditional hierarchy, the more senior you are, the more people you are responsible for supporting or serving. And you could even joke, yes, the crap still flows downhill. The higher you climb in the traditional organizational structure, the more you have people to serve, and therefore the more issues and challenges you have to deal with to free up those resources and those people to work on tasks. Okay, that is the triangle and inverted triangle when we talk about leadership models and visualizations. Now, where does the circle come from? Well, let's say you are a leader and you have created your inverted pyramid, right? This is your leader. Okay? You're going to create an inverted triangle or an upside down pyramid, whatever term you want to use, to show the people that you serve, much like an org chart would be, but from a servant leadership perspective. So the first layer might be something like your direct reports. And then the managers or their people, the people who report directly to them. And you might not be that high of a level. It could just be direct reports right here. And that could be it. You don't have to have multiple layers. And over here, you might have all the employees or individual contributors, depending upon your place in the organization. This you might call your team, right? Your inverted pyramid for your team. Now, in addition to your team at the workplace, you have customers. And you're probably already seeing where the circle comes in, right? So these might be your direct customers. And let's say you're in a business-to-business model, and they have end customers. And maybe they have users. You can tell, by the way, I stink at drawing. I don't know why. I enjoy it. I enjoy doing it, but sorry for the lack of a great circle here. All right, so that's another inverted pyramid that is starting to create a semicircle, right? Now, what else do you have? Well, you have suppliers, or partners, we'll call it. We'll make it nice and broad, right? Partners. And again, you have your direct partners, and you have their customers. But now, wait a minute, you say, Ben, why in the world would I be concerned about the customers of my partners? Well, gang, that's the difference, right? A good leader is going to be focused on the needs of all their stakeholders. This is why you call this the leadership circle. Sometimes I call it the stakeholder circle. The point is, when we see failures, let me go out here and let's say you have another branch for investors or owners, as the case may be. This might be owners. All right, and then we've got, wow, I'm really botching the circle. Maybe this is the community in which you operate, right? You've got the plants, and you've got neighborhoods, and so forth, right? And then maybe your last one, partners, clients. What else have we covered here? Let's think charities or foundations. We'll call this charities, okay, that your organization supports. Where we see most organizations fail, where leaders often fail, is when they become too focused on one particular group. Usually it's something like they become too focused on these investors or owners, right? And they're worried so much about stock returns and dividends at the exclusion of things like your employees. A good example here might be the recent Southwest issue, right? Southwest Airlines had massive IT problems because for so many years they were focused on the dividends and giving dividends back, while for generations, literally, of employees, certainly decades at the very least, their employees were saying, hey, we need to invest more in the technology. We are vastly outdated. They kept ignoring that, and Southwest is usually championed such a great servant leadership company, but they failed their employees in this case because they were making that big trade-off on the ownership, trying to give those dividends all the time. This is why having an understanding of the leadership circle and the critical nature of serving all your stakeholders is so important. Now, you could take this even one step further. If you were to look at this, this certainly looks to me like it's all professional, right? Professional view. On the other hand, you could take a personal view too, right? And you might have here your work. This could be employees. So we could still start off with the work, right? And so on. We'll just call this work. But then, of course, you also have, and one may very easily argue this should be the first one you do, you could have your family, right? Or you might have your spouse and your children and your extended family, right? If you are a person of faith, you might then have your faith block, where you might have church and studies, or the broader community of churchgoers of your faith, and so on. So you could keep building this out in the same manner, and this might be your personal. However, I do encourage you to try and make one large circle when you're doing this exercise. That is everything, because that speaks to the work-life alignment that I've talked about before, not work-life balance. The difference being, if you're trying to balance, work versus personal, you're never going to be really yourself in either place because you're always trying to juggle the two. So I like to do these as one big circle that is both the personal and professional side. I highly encourage you to consider that approach. But regardless, this is what we talk about when we talk about the servant leadership circle. So what does that mean? Why do we talk about the servant leadership circle and that exercise in the concept of thoroughness? Well, because there's several key attributes of thoroughness, right? First, you have to be a systems thinker. Remember, for each of the principles we talk about at Boss Beat and Modern Servant Leader, we talk about the attributes that support it. Being a systems thinker means not going willy-nilly on different crazy ideas. You're not going to fly off the hinge when some new idea comes up every week. Instead, you're building solutions that introduce systems and tools and processes for running successful delivery, operations, etc., for the long term. That's where many founders and entrepreneurs fail. They are great at the beginning, but they fail to evolve into systems thinkers. That's why a lot of times founders of organizations have to get replaced. The second key attribute of being thorough is awareness, both internal and external. External awareness, are you familiar with the industry, your competitors? Are you reading trade journals and marketing materials, understanding where the major trends are? And on the flip side, where this comes in so much, where these diagrams come in so much, is the internal, the self-awareness side of things. How aware are you of where you're investing your time and energy? Are you balancing all stakeholders, or are you focusing on one group of stakeholders at the exclusion of others? That's why it's so important and why this thoroughness attribute comes in. And the last attribute is visibility. This is typically thought of less often. It's not, when we talk about being visible as a leader, it's not out there searching for the limelight, trying to be in the magazine covers. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being present for your people. Are you around? Are you easily accessible? Yes, we all like to say, oh, I've got an open door policy, but do you live it? Do you live the open door policy? Or do you just say it and then every time somebody comes by, oh, I'm just so busy, I'll have to catch up with you later. You have to be visible. You have to be accessible to your people. That's all part of being thorough as a good boss in business and a good servant leader. Now, as we look to build better boss behaviors in ourselves and our team, what does that mean for us? What kind of quotes can we look at? Because let's be honest, we all love a good quote, right? Well, I like Daniel Goleman's quote in this case. Daniel says, if your emotional abilities aren't in hand, if you don't have self-awareness, if you are not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are not going to get very far. You've got to be thorough. You've got to have empathy. You've got to have your emotions in check. Now, what questions do we ask ourselves as we seek to build these better boss behaviors in ourselves and our team? First, what does your leadership circle look like? Gang, it doesn't take long. You saw how quickly I was diagramming it there. Take a couple of minutes and diagram out your own leadership circle. What does it look like? I would encourage you to do both the personal and professional, either separately or together, but at the very least, to get started, do that personal or do the professional, pick one. And here's the catcher, that second question. If you made this scale of each slice in that circle, each inverted triangle, relative to how much time and attention it receives from you, what would that tell you about your priorities? When I do this exercise in my workshops and training, gang, I can't tell you, it's pretty much without fail every time there is a few people who get that aha moment and they realize, wow, I am really not investing my time where I think my priorities are, or where I think my priorities are really not getting the best quality from me. Every week, every day on Boss Beat, we cover one of the 7 core principles of great leadership. They're populating on your screen there: selflessness, empathy, resolve, virtuousness, authenticity, nonpartisanship, and yes, thoroughness. Now, why do we cover those? Because we use the acronym model of servant leadership. We do not want you to feel like you have to take my word for it. This is based on 2 decades of researching the greatest leadership experts and the greatest leadership practitioners and examples, famous historic examples, and modern day business leaders, so that you know that what you are getting here is actionable and practical and proven to be true and effective at building better boss behaviors in business. If you enjoy this sort of content, please give me a like, give me a subscribe, and check out modernservantleader.com. There you'll find tons of free resources, gang. This is my mission, to help you and others avoid bad boss behaviors and build better boss behaviors. Nobody should have to suffer under a bad boss, gang. Until next time, my friends, keep serving.